The following is a discussion with Brooklyn Parks, a film and video game enthusiast and a dear friend. All right, how are we doing, Brooklyn?
So good.
Yeah, surviving this very snowy day.
Barely. It took a long time to get here.
Yeah, it took me super long to get home from work just because all the traffic and everything. And no one knows how to drive in the snow, even if you've lived in Utah, I feel like.
Neither do I, to be honest. When it started snowing just a couple days ago, I did almost run into someone.
Oh,
So,
shoot. Well, do you have four-wheel drive in your car?
that's a great question, and I'm gonna say yes,
Okay.
based
It's
off
it's
of
a
nothing.
it's SUV, right? So
Yes,
okay, it probably at least has all-wheel drive, which is close. It's
Right.
basically the same thing. So.
right.
Well, welcome to the podcast. You're sporting our new mugs,
Yes.
which is fun. Honestly, without the hot chocolate, it'd probably be even colder out here.
Yeah.
But we're surviving. So, anyways, thank you for being here. I know it was hard to get here, but I'm excited to talk about music. I know you are a film and video game enthusiast.
Yeah.
Is that how do you explain it? Maybe.
Yeah. It's more like I'm one of those people who I just have such a wide variety of interests, and I care a little too much. I like being a nerd about things.
Okay, fair enough.
But I'm definitely not a music proficient.
Okay. But what do you mean you care too much?
Just, I love learning about new things. So I like, for example, learning about why a music composer did it in the way that they did. Especially when it comes to, because filmography is more the thing that I care the most about.
Mm-hmm.
In that wheelhouse, why is it that, for example, Hans Zimmer in Interstellar, the way that he made that score in particular, when I was in the movie theater watching it for the first time, there was such, I don't know, like an immediate reaction, almost like physically listening to music like that. Like, I wonder what's going through the minds of people as they're creating things. Or I think there's just something beautiful about seeing what other people find they're so good at doing. Just listening to composers and I just like understanding why people make the things that they do. It's like another form of art. I have an artistic background. I like design. So just understanding other artists and the way that they think and the way that they create is just really fascinating to me.
Okay. And just so those that are watching understand what your background is, maybe you can explain that a little bit so they maybe have some context.
Yes. So as a child, I love story. And so as a kid, one of my favorite things that I like to do is creating characters and coming up with just very short stories. I always had a hard time falling asleep at night.
Yeah.
So as a way to like kind of wind my brain down, I would tell myself stories and in the morning be like, okay, I need to create a character that is that person.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I think films and video games are just another extension of storytelling. Even though sometimes people don't necessarily combine video games with storytelling.
It probably depends on the video game,
It
but yeah.
definitely depends on the video game. But to build that and make that a more beautiful experience, music has a big component of almost it's the assisting part of how do you not just have beautiful dialogue, but how do you make it more emotionally resonant with music and that sort of thing. Anyways, so as a kid, I loved watching stuff. I loved just dipping into new worlds, and I was one of those kids that as a child was really obsessed with Harry Potter, for example.
Oh, you don't say.
You don't say. So it just kind of stems from that, just a love of storytelling.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know that that context is there a little bit more. And so with that, do you think you kind of connected to it because you had a creative mind, right? So music is a very creative, art form. I mean, all the art forms are creative to a certain extent, right? Some like dance is more of like it's creative in the physical sense, right? When you're creating movement. Music, obviously audio, we're creating that, but it's also storytelling. Also, some artists are a lot more storytelling than others. there's a lot of songs nowadays you'll hear, especially more in kind of the hip hop scene, that I wouldn't say are really storytelling, maybe more of a matter of fact type of deal. I don't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think there's a form of escapism
Yeah.
in art, and that's certainly what it was for me as a child. Just wishing I was a part of this and that world. Wish I was able to interact myself with these kinds of characters. And so instead, I would have to build a character that would reside in that place.
Yeah.
It's more that thinking, I think,
Okay. Fair enough.
for me. Kind of jumping into that, I have I have a few different playlists that I've built. I don't have a ton that I just like to go back to and listen to. And some of it are more like party music. And then I have one that I just called Relax.
Okay.
And when I if you go through that, you'll notice, wow, it's a soundtrack from this kind of obscure 90s children's movie.
And that's your relax
Yeah,
playlist. Okay.
because there are a lot of films that whenever I hear, it kind of transports me back to that sort of whimsical feeling as a kid watching something.
Yeah.
To be frank, there are a lot of sad songs inside of films.
So you're relaxed by the sad songs more.
I guess these aren't some of them, but just an example, like in Dumbo, when Dumbo's mom is singing that goodbye song or like a lullaby song to Dumbo.
Yeah.
Even if I listen to that now, I think I would get like a my heart kind of a feeling.
Okay.
So it's
Pull out
just
your
kind of
heartstring.
yeah, absolutely. So just some that come off the top of my head, like the Casper theme. Did you ever watch Casper as a kid?
Yeah, yeah.
Casper. It was almost like music that was too had no right to be so good in a kids film. It's like that kind of a music.
Yeah.
So Casper's theme. Did you ever watch the dinosaur? Apparently it's produced by Steven Spielberg. We're Back. It's an old cartoon film.
We're Back. No, I watched The Land Before Time. I watched all those.
That is one that I do also have in my The Land Before Time.
Those are
Another
great
like
movies.
lost mom. Just like I guess it almost carried the fear of losing your parent and being on this journey by yourself. The Land Before Time does. We're Back is also, it feels like every story is about this, but these basically orphan children on an adventure, and also that kind of emotional storytelling and the kind of music to it. Did you ever watch Spirit?
Spirit. Is that with the horse?
Yeah.
Yes. I have seen it. Yes, yes.
That's some other music that when I was talking to my friends when I was coming on here, I was mentioning this, asking them like, what are some stories and music that you like still think about to this day? And Spirit was on all of our lists.
Yeah. That's interesting. My sisters love that movie. Like,
yeah.
I thought it was, a good movie, but I don't think about it like all the time like some people do. Apparently, like you.
Yeah.
But
as an adult, horses terrify me, but at the time, like, this is the most beautiful music I've ever heard. Edward Scissorhands, I don't know if I really watched that film a lot, but I must have just seen clips of the movie growing up. That's another one that, I don't know, there's such a whimsy to it. I think maybe it's just a special time of 90s children films or children semi-friendly films that has this, I don't know, like a richness to it or something, versus not to crap on Disney these days, but there's just something different about the music quality and I think just maybe the richness of instruments or something.
yeah,
That
I would agree with that.
Another one, and the reason why I thought of this topic is more because when I was home for Christmas, the Polar Express was on, like 18 times every day. And coming back to that movie, and again, it's just like pulling at your heartstrings. It brings you right back to that first moment of watching the Polar Express. And it's like if you could encapsulate the feeling of being a kid, of the wonder of Christmas, of the hope of this storyline of being on this of not believing and then coming across Santa. And anyways, it's almost like there's something about the music that you listen to as a child that is almost like a coming to God moment or something where you're like, there's something more out there. There's like wonder and anyways,
magic.
and
Yeah.
magic. And I didn't know this, and it makes perfect sense now that I looked it up. But you smell something that you was around your house as a kid or something, and it brings back a memory. Um, Apparently, music does the exact same thing. It highlights the same parts of your brain of memory and emotion. So I think that's why I put all of these songs in my playlist, just so I can go back and be like, oh man, just so like maybe when I need. It's comfort music.
Yeah.
It takes you back, even though they are what could be considered sad music. There's just something about like, oh man, it just almost like a little hit of dopamine of that hope that you had, or just that feeling of almost like coziness that that childhood music brings back. And so I just thought it was really interesting. I just wanted to explore how music brings in emotion into stories, um, and just wanted to understand more why some music scores are effective and some are not. Um, and I guess just because to me there's great music and then there's great music that plays an emotional purpose at the same time. So just as some examples, Pirates of the Caribbean.
I love those movies.
That's a great film.
Another
And
Johnny Depp one, ironically too.
this is true. Um, I don't know. I feel like everyone who ever watched that film immediately had the sense of adventure. They knew exactly what it felt like to be a pirate.
Yeah. I
Um,
felt like a pirate watching it, even though I'm not a pirate.
but even just listening to the score, it's almost like there are some scores that are the film, if that makes sense. Like the one cannot exist without the other. Um, Another one would be like Jurassic Park.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
You just immediately step back into the experience of being them as they stand up and look out and see the dinosaurs for the first time.
Right.
Um, Lord of the Rings, of course.
I that's some of my favorite music. Dun 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 dun.
Yeah.
That's what I think of every time.
Whenever I see like TikToks or whatever of people in the gym listening to Lord of the Rings
To get pumped up.
soundtrack to get pumped up, I'm like, that's incredible.
I need to do that. I've never done that. I usually listen to like 90s like hard rock, grunge. That's kind of why I listen to it in the gym. But now I got to listen to
Da-da-da.
yeah. Some running,
Yeah.
pretending I'm Sam.
Yeah.
I can't unsee that now though.
Ooh, another one. Have you watched a lot of Ghibli films, Hayao Miyazaki films?
Probably one-offs, but I wouldn't say a lot.
Okay.
Like,
Well, for the girlies out there who watch a lot of Ghibli films, that's another one that I watched those a lot as a kid, and as an adult, I love them just as much, and I'm still a fan of the studio. I have to like go see every single one of their films. Their music is so beautiful and so iconic, and I don't know. The films themselves are so beautifully animated. As the music kind of just becomes an extension of that beautiful animation. There's something unique about their music that as soon as you hear a Ghibli film score, like you know where it comes from, even though there are all these different kinds of films and totally different stories. They just resonate in a way that are like, it takes you kind of, again, that going back to that feeling of escapism when you become such a huge fan of this type of storytelling, and these like usually very strong like female characters and such, and this beautiful whimsical world that is in every Ghibli film. You just immediately, as soon as you hear one of their songs, like, oh man, I gotta go get my broom and I gotta go deliver some bread. That's a Keekly delivery service.
Okay.
Anyways.
Yeah.
Or you want to go out into a beautiful field of flowers. You want to be in Howl's Moving Castle scene. And anyways, there's just something beautiful about it. Another one, this is kind of a little bit of a deep cut, but there was, maybe much to your surprise, I don't know if you've ever seen this movie, a holiday film that was also a romance starring Jack Black as one of the romantic leads. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Is it the one they make fun of in The Office?
I have no idea.
Probably not. I think that was just made for The Office, but
Oh, okay. It's called The Holiday.
The Holiday. What's the premise and kind of story?
The premise is Cameron Diaz is a hardworking working woman in LA who just hates her life and just broke up with her longtime boyfriend. At the same time, Kate Winslet's character has been deeply in love with this man who works at the same company as her, unrequited, even though he's just been pulling her along and pulling her along and pulling her along. And it's Christmas time. They're like, I gotta get out of here. I'm having a miserable time, having a miserable life. And so they decide to change places and like house swap. And of course, in this adventure, they find other men and have a beautiful little Christmas romance. Hans Zimmer scored this film, which is why it makes a lot of sense that when I watch it, I'm like, holy crap.
That's why one of the reasons
I love
you think
this film.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. And because, you know, Jack Black is the romantic lead that really he ought to be.
Man, I've never thought of Jack Black as like a romantic lead, but like Jack Black, I have to see this movie now.
You do. And, you know, again, it's like the caliber of actors that this movie doesn't deserve. And a caliber of music I don't know if this movie deserves. But there's... And think of, like, what if Hans Zimmer did a Christmas score that was also a little romantic at times? Incredible notion.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Anyways, that's definitely one that I grabbed and like to listen to. Another score that I'd heard a lot before, but seeing it in a film, I'm like, oh, I can see why this is so powerful. Pretty recently, I think it was last month, if not the month before that, a new Godzilla film came out, Godzilla -1.
I don't know if I've seen that one.
Okay.
I saw recently
You would know
Godzilla
if you
versus
did.
King Kong.
That's Garbajo. We're not talking about that.
Okay.
Godzilla -1 goes back to, well, it's a Japanese-made film.
Uh-huh.
But it was big enough, and so there's so much buzz around it that it came to America. So it probably came out months before, but in America it came out in December. And I went to see it. I was very excited about it. And when you hear Godzilla's theme, it's like, I know I've heard this before. I think it's like had a resurgence on TikTok and that sort of thing. But I grew up watching like a couple Godzilla themes every now and again. It's still the same theme that they had back in the 60s or whatever when they first made Godzilla. And it's kind of like almost coming back to if they did like a remake of Jaws or something. That initial hard-hitting theme that immediately you go, I'm afraid.
Yeah. Okay. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and it does have that Jaws-like quality and it's so powerful and so like you feel like it's not just Jaws gives you the sense of something creeping up on you, where Godzilla is immediately the terror of a giant. But it kind of has a similar feeling of that constant beat as the terror.
Yeah.
Which I just find quite interesting. Going back to the idea of music that really hit me as a child, I don't think anything can really compete, not just with me, but probably most kids in the world, as what Harry Potter did. Which presumably you were a big fan of as a child.
Yeah, I mean, I liked Harry Potter. A lot of people said I looked like Harry Potter when I was a kid, because you should see pictures of me when I'm a kid.
Really?
With my glasses, and I had short hair and stuff. Anyways, yeah, before I, have all this. But my oldest brother, Chris, would always joke. He'd be like, oh, you look like Harry Potter. I'm like, all right, draw the scar. But we were definitely more of a Star Wars family.
Oh, okay.
So,
Interesting.
yeah.
Okay.
Which we can talk about. I actually wanted to bring that up
Yeah.
just a little bit. So, you're fairly familiar with Star Wars, right?
I'm fairly familiar with Star Wars.
Okay. well, there's sometimes I've met people. They're like, they're just in the Harry Potter, they don't like Star Wars, or they're just in Lord of the Rings, they don't like Star Wars, or
Really?
yeah, which is weird because I like all.
Yeah.
I think they're all great.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm assuming then you saw the Obi-Wan Kenobi series, right?
I did.
So there was for me, and I noticed it right away. There was only one thing John Williams wrote for that whole series,
Really?
and that was the theme for Obi-Wan. He had never written a theme for Obi-Wan. He came out of retirement because Disney was like, we need a theme for Obi-Wan. He was like, all right, I got this. I fine, just give me a bag of money, right? Good. And that was the only song or like theme throughout the whole series that I actually like enjoyed listening to. And maybe I'm just stuck up because I like John Williams, but I don't think so, because like all the fights that like when Darth Vader and Obi-Wan ran into each other the first time, like I was really questioning why they weren't using so many other themes that John Williams used all throughout the other Star Wars films, because it just didn't feel like Star Wars to me.
Yeah.
That was the biggest thing. Also, I think the writing struggled quite a bit. I think that's another big reason. But I think if the music was more aligned, it would have not felt so far one way, if that makes sense.
No, I totally understand, because kind of going back to what I said, there's some music that is the film, and the film is the music, and without the two, it something feels wrong.
Yeah. It's a weird remake.
Yeah.
Without the things that made it good.
Especially when you're reintroducing like an extremely beloved character without all the things that were like surrounding him to make him feel like that person. Well, not everything, but the music.
Well, Darth Vader's theme, like,
yeah,
dawn, dawn, dawn,
yeah.
dawn, dawn, or the Imperial March, I guess, is technically what the
right,
song,
but is it?
But is it? It's. I mean, it's Darth Vader's theme,
right.
but that was something that recently happened, right? Or somewhat recently. It's been a little bit that I noticed right away, and I was really questioning. I'm like, Disney has the rights to these, so why aren't they using them? Like, to me, that was very surprising, because that's a no-brainer. But
yeah,
you know,
I don't know. I guess when you're trying to create a new property and a new experience that is disconnected from the main films, I can see why they might want to do that. But yeah, it removes that emotional weight of moments without pulling back in. Because Obi-Wan already have some form of a theme?
He didn't, so that's why John Williams wrote one. He said he always wanted to write one for Obi-Wan, but George Lucas just never had him do one for whatever reason.
The true main character that never got his moment.
Yeah,
it's pretty messed up.
It is messed up, because Obi-Wan's like my favorite character.
Yeah.
He's like,
I think he's most people's favorite character.
Yeah, I mean, the older you get, I think the more you like understand how Anakin fell. Doesn't make it right, but like you understand it more. When I was a kid, I was like, "What the crap is this kid doing?" Like, don't kill, Mace Windu. We like Mace Windu, even though sometimes he's been mean to you. And then you get older and you're like, okay, I can see it a little bit more. Like, and he was worried about Padme, and his best friend, was an old creepy
Perfect
Sith.
man. Oh, that guy. Yes.
Who were you talking about?
I was like, Obi-Wan's his best friend, and he's a perfect man.
Oh, yes. Yeah. That honestly, it's so hard to watch episode 3 still when they like have that back to back right before the fight.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end, just Obi-Wan saying, I loved you. You were my brother. Hayden Christensen did a great job, no matter what people say, in my opinion. He had some angsty moments that was written in, and he played the part. Like, what can you do? It's like, okay, this is your part, be an angsty kind of teenager or early adult, young adult,
Have you ever seen him in anything else?
Hayden Christensen?
Yeah.
I think, I can't recall like what it has been, but I thought there was like a younger version of him I saw in something, but it was like very small role.
Gotcha.
Have you?
No, but I've heard things.
Oh, okay.
That's all I want to say.
Well, if he's listening, you go, Hayden.
No. I'm not throwing shade. I'm just saying.
Okay, fair enough.
I hear there's a little Italian pizza movie that he's in.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, I'll have to go find it.
Yes, some romance.
Huh.
Anyways, well, for me, Harry Potter.
Okay, go to Harry Potter. No, we could talk about it. I love Harry Potter.
um,
Is there like a specific movie that you like or
I
theme?
absolutely 1 and 2. It's almost kind of like same with how you can associate music with movies. I associate colors with each Harry Potter film, which probably makes sense. I think they almost took the colors of the covers. I don't know if this has ever been looked at or analyzed. It probably has, but the covers that were of the covers of each of the books when they first came out, like the first one's red, right?
Yeah.
And then the last ones are green. And I feel like if you watch the films, there's definitely like a color coordination with the covers. Anyways, whatever. The first Harry Potter and the second Harry Potter built the world and created the whimsy and magic and honestly the incredible set design that went into that film. So it felt like you were really entering something you'd never seen before.
Yeah.
And the
Definitely felt that way.
music, John Williams' music is, to me, this is the best score he ever made. Um, and partially I knew that it's been a long time since I watched the Harry Potter films. I can still quote every moment of them, but it's been such a long time. And when in 2022, I believe it was, they did the Harry Potter Return to Hogwarts, the Harry Potter 20th anniversary. It was like a little documentary that HBO put on.
Okay, yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
Watching that, and it was all the actors going back and kind of talking about their experience of being little kids and making these films, um and just like how it was an integral part of them growing up and creating these friendships, and like what an incredible experience to work with all these people, and they were just annoying little kids at the time, and then they grew up, but they're playing the music that you're familiar with from Harry Potter throughout this documentary, and every time they were talking about like this was an integral part of my childhood, and I was like, you're right, it's an integral part of my childhood. And there was just an immediate, especially at the end when they're like when the man who played Hagrid came on and he has like this final quote, and it might have been in the documentary itself. I don't know if it qualifies as a documentary or just like a little film that they made, but he either died soon after the filming of this, or they had like a in memory of him kind of moment in the film, and Alan Rickman as well at that point. And I'm like, man, like these people, there was such a it just brought me right back to I loved this world so much as a kid. Um and it had like the same emotional weight as it did back then. And maybe it has something to do with being a child and having those sad moments hit you so much harder. And I think it's like even like the fear that moments in those films and the films I listed off before bring in you. It's kind of like that same tension and hope and wonder and magic that the score hit me with back then. It had like the same resonance, and I was like getting emotional. I'm not a very emotional person. So it was just really interesting watching that and having that same intensity to it. I'm presumably when you were watching that Obi-Wan moment, did it have like that same like, or did they pull any other songs from the Star Wars?
Not that I noticed.
Mm.
And I think at the end of the series there was like maybe a 10-second segment of like the Force theme, but I think that was it. Besides the Obi-Wan theme song, or the theme for Obi-Wan, and it just played at the beginning of every episode. And I played maybe once or twice, a little bit, in a couple moments, like when he finally like started using his lightsaber again, was deflecting bullets. I think the theme played there for a minute. Bullets, lasers, you know what I mean. But yeah, other than that, I don't recall, and I was paying pretty good attention to that because to me I was like, oh, wow, well, are they going to use this theme, coming up? And then they wouldn't. I'd be like, okay, well, that's a letdown. And I waited so long. They like pushed that back that so many times. And so like, I was like looking forward to it. And then they pushed back. I was like, gotta wait.
There's no emotional release almost. It's like you've been robbed of an emotional moment of like something that's built and they don't use it, it's very frustrating. Like,
Yeah.
I would be annoyed.
I was, and I am a little bit. So I just try not to let it keep me up at night. But
Yeah.
you know, it is what it is. There's a lot of things that Disney has been doing that I don't really align with
Mm.
personally. Like The Mandalorian, I've really liked, but I still feel like now it's still kind of going in a weird direction. I mean, I heard they like fired Pedro Pascal, which I don't know if you've heard that for season 4 or whatever. And it's like, well, I guess he is just a guy in a suit, so it could really be anyone. But then, like,
Who's
knowing
gonna
it's Pedro
give the
Pascal,
voice.
Yeah.
Well, he hasn't been in the suit for the last couple seasons.
yeah, it's been his stunt double, right? So I guess that doesn't really matter
Hmm.
at the end of the day. But aren't they doing like a movie?
Couldn't tell you.
Okay, I thought I saw that.
I stopped caring about Disney content, to be perfectly honest with you.
Okay, that's fair. What about Marvel? Same thing.
Yes, anything that comes from Disney Plus, I'm not gonna watch. It's just a rule now.
That's fair. It's better to not let yourself down, right?
It's just, it feels stale, and I'm kind of skipping ahead of my thoughts, but I've seen people complain about this, and I've kind of taken notice of this myself for, I don't know, the last 5 years, that there's, in the music realm, there's just not a theme. You don't recognize music like you used to. And when I do, it's few and far between. I'm like, I love this soundtrack. I think it's kind of in the same realm of like, it's trying to create an emotion, trying to fabricate a moment rather than build a moment, where it feels more like music is more about ambiance than it is about tying it to a character or a moment that gives that emotional release, that lets you build up to a moment and be like, that's incredible and I feel something right now. There's just not as much great storytelling happening. And it's kind of like, I'm not really interested in Disney anymore because it's too much copy paste and other studios are doing it better. So why should I pay money for that?
That's a good point. There are a lot of studios that are like killing it, and Disney is losing a lot of money. I don't think.
I don't know if they are.
I think they make a lot of money still, but I think they're still losing a lot of money from how much they could be making. I think they projected how much they can make if they were, on the uptick like they were. But I think they've come to a place where they make money, but it's not the loyal fan base they built up. So they've lost a lot of their loyal fan bases. And then there's some people who are just kind of in the middle ground where they're like, yeah, we've been fans, but we don't really care. It's like, and then, I don't know. That's what, from a third party perspective, I haven't looked at their numbers or anything. That's what it seems like. And a lot of my peers, I hear the same thing. They're like, yeah, we just don't really care. There are some new people getting in, into the market as far as like becoming fans of what they do. And that's great. Mm-hmm. They're also doing a lot more like, they're more diverse than they used to be as well, with like, the types of roles that they're having actors do. And I mean, for instance, The Little Mermaid, right? Mm-hmm. It's a completely different race than it was originally, right? So that's being more diverse than they ever have. So that's also opening it up to like a new audience that maybe they didn't have before. So I guess I can't say for sure. I haven't looked at their numbers, but I know it definitely has affected me. So
yeah, I'm gonna go out on a limb and guess that they're doing just fine, and they
probably
laugh at us.
They're like, if you only see how much money I have under my bed right now, it hurts my back waking up with it.
But I think there is a point to be made that there's just not the same creativity happening. Where before we went to Disney and we would go to Pixar because it was innovative. For example, the music in Up.
Oh, I love
Is there anything more powerful?
Probably not.
Probably not. And a lot of their other films, just like it hits you in a way, and the story would hit you in a way. Versus now, if I'm gonna go to the theater and pay money to see a film, it has to be something that I feel like is going to be a true experience. But music, I don't know if I go to films necessarily to see music. It's almost like a nice surprise every time. At the end of the day, you want a great story. but music does so much in assisting a story or elevating a story that just it can't be overlooked. I don't know, but yeah, it is interesting. There's just been maybe just like a small handful of films that I knew that it was going to be scored by someone, or that it was some form of like a musical that I was like, oh man, I am interested.
Yeah.
Anyways, going back to Harry Potter and John Williams, there are I love suspense films and like not I wouldn't qualify that as horror necessarily, but
Thriller, maybe.
yeah, more of a thriller.
Okay. I'm saying I would rather watch a thriller than just like blood and gore for the sake of blood and gore. But
But I like, for example, disaster films and monster films, like those sort of things. And it was really interesting to me when I was looking at John Williams and his filmography, or what he's composed for films. Another one that I was very surprised, a film I love. It's one of those films where I'm like, I need to buy this because I watch it too much and I pay too much money to watch it once a year and rent it from YouTube or whatever. War of the Worlds.
that's a good one.
Oh man, I love that film.
You'll have to buy it, I think.
I know, I do. I think I should put it on my Christmas list for next year. But the moment specifically that I thought of is when, at the beginning of the film, Tom Cruise's character, they saw the lightning strike the street nearby, and he runs over, and a whole crowd has surrounded this spot. And when the earth starts to shake and the ground starts to shift until it cracks, and then this monster, the robot, emerges, the tripod. And the music at that point, at first it's curiosity, it's a little bit of fear, but not quite to that point yet. And as soon as the tripod emerges, it's still just like almost like the music kind of overwhelms you a little bit, and then the moment it starts attacking, it turns into a Jaw theme, kind of like with the Godzilla thing, where it hits you, doom, doom, doom. And just like how me and my friends went to a concert last Halloween time, where it was like it was a percussion thing, but what they would do is they kind of had this whole moment of what if movies had a different theme or had played different music. And so they would play clips of Psycho, or they had Jaws in there as well. And they would play different music at the same time. And it would hit you with like, what would this moment be like without the music that made it? But what really interested me about War of the Worlds in particular is John, apparently he didn't know, he hadn't watched most of the film by the time that he started scoring it. Yeah. Which I thought was really interesting because Harry Potter is so thematic. Every characters and locations have their own score. When War of the Worlds, usually when you think War of the Worlds, what's the, I'm going to say, sound effect that you normally think of?
Oh, well, you tell me.
When the tripods come out and they give that horrible, eerie foghorn sound, like announcing their presence. And as the film goes on, you like hear it in the distance. When I was surprised when I learned that John had scored this film, just because it didn't have the same thematic intensity that we know him for things like Star Wars and things like other things. Like, that kind of makes sense. Even though I really love this film and the music is fantastic, it doesn't have the same, like, the tripods don't have a theme necessarily.
Yeah.
Moments have. It's kind of like goes back to that, my complaint of movies today is there's not a combination of the two thoughts. There's melodies, and then there's emotional moments, and it's almost like ambiance to enhance a moment, but they don't intertwine in a way that made Harry Potter such an impactful, emotionally driven film, musically and story-wise.
Yeah, and I guess with that, do you have to have both of those elements, some really good like songwriting or composition work, and then a really good plot to be to be successful, like a successful movie? Or do you think if one is good enough, it doesn't matter how the other one is?
I think they work together to create excellence in a memorable way. So, just for examples, they're the themes that you remember, you immediately know where they're from. So, for example, Indiana Jones. In your head, what's in your head right now?
Do 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 do. Yeah.
Exactly. There's this combination that creates an Indiana Jones, everyone that's a member of your household kind of mentality. Like you know exactly everything about this man. You know the story. Everyone had a moment watching it with their father for the first time. And you know that and you it's just kind of like a shared experience almost versus films where it's not a recognizable theme. You just don't have that same connection. There's not like the emotional distance is greater versus if you can recognize it and you can pull it immediately and combine the two. So I think there's lots of movies that you're more likely to say there's a bad sequel or a bad spin-off television show. You're
Oh,
more likely to go watch it because you had that incredible moment as a kid
yeah.
watching it and it just becomes like a generational experience almost.
Do you think streaming's ruined that at all?
Um
Because you don't have to go to a movie theater with your friends anymore, so you could easily just watch tons of films by yourself and maybe not really have that. I mean, the theater experience, obviously, the surround sound makes a big difference, but also you're not sitting there. It's not like it doesn't have to be a social endeavor, you know?
That's a great question, and that probably does have a lot to do with like the this is probably not the right word to use, but the democratization of the music of that a there's not like a key moment or it's not you and I experience something. It becomes a little like fuzz at some point. There can be incredible music in films, but you're more quickly to forget it because it's not the same moment as
Yeah.
it used to be.
It's not
That's
in
a
your
straight
face as
point.
much. Yeah.
Right.
I have you seen Batman versus Superman, like that DC one they made a while
I
ago?
sure did.
So a
I
lot of
was looking
people
forward to that film.
a lot of people didn't like it, right? And I was like, I wasn't like impressed with it, but I didn't hate it.
Mhm.
So, and for me, I actually really like the dark themes that they had in the music,
Mm.
especially around Batman.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, Batman's character is kind of more of a dark. He's a vigilante.
Yeah.
He's always hated on, and they really play off of that. You know, with Superman being the hero that everyone adores, kind of a thing, and then Batman doing all this stuff without superpowers and getting kind of crapped on by everyone, by the police and everything. And you kind of see like the resentment in the music to me. So I like the music and and that's if it didn't have that, I probably would have disliked it a lot more.
Yeah.
But I talked to a friend about that. They're like, oh, I didn't even really like listen to the music. I was like, oh, okay.
I think I'm more like you where I pay attention to it just because I have such a bigger interest in it. I don't even know how to not necessarily I to be frank, I don't remember the theme of that one, but I do really remember the latest Batman theme just cuz not to go back to Jaws freaking for the third time, but it has that same element of just hitting you dun 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 almost like a death march kind of
Yeah,
a feeling.
it was very marchy. Yeah.
um so that one I feel like I have more of a stood out immediately and because of its simplicity probably more than anything. um but did you see Flash when it came out?
That's one I have not seen.
Okay.
I've never been like a fan of like the Flash. Like I've seen them, I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I'll see it. But like then there's just like nothing that pulls me because like I don't have friends that are like, yeah, let's go see it. And so I'm like, okay,
Well, not for spoilers, but did you know that there's a certain Batman in that film?
yeah, I didn't know that,
Okay.
but
So when that particular theme came in, when they reintroduced his Batcave,
yeah,
I was, oh, it kind of did the same thing where it struck me. I was like, I love this theme and I love this Batman,
yeah,
and I forgot about that until that's what when you were saying. Sorry, not to go back to it again. Having not having Star Wars music in Obi-Wan,
yeah, uh-huh.
they are robbing you of the same emotional moment. So when they pulled in that theme in The Flash, it was so nostalgic for me. It's like the first Batman that I grew up with feeling. Spoilers. I'm so sorry.
For those that have not seen it, right?
Yeah. Where the old Batman theme is made by Danny Elfman, and he's the same guy who made Edward Scissorhands, and it kind of has, and I think he scored quite a few of Tim Burton's films, so it has the same sort of, I don't know, ethereal, a little bit creepy feeling to it, versus, and I thought those were super fascinating, so I have to bring it up. The guy who did the last Batman theme, Michael Giacchino. Again, this is the Batman theme that's very foreboding and beat the Death March feeling. You want to guess what films he scored? We already mentioned one of them.
We already mentioned one of them. So,
and it was a very beautiful soundtrack.
Oh. Man,
I think I said something like, "Is there anything more beautiful?" when I mentioned it.
You know, I'm not remembering what
Up.
you said. Oh, Up, yes. Wait, what? He
He did Up. Isn't that wild?
huh?
And The Incredibles and Ratatouille.
And Ratatouille.
Well, like that's really fascinating.
I could see Up and The Incredibles. Like the same composer for those, but huh. Interesting.
Yeah, but it's the only reason why it kind of would make sense to me because they both have such a strong theme to the characters and to the world. Like the Incredibles soundtrack, for example, is so thematic in that it had that 60s feel that the film just like barely suggested to.
Yeah.
And like that classic pow punch
Comic book type of,
comic
you know.
book sort of a thing.
Yeah.
Versus, I'm sure it was such a burden coming up with a theme for a Batman film after it had been used and recycled 800 times by this point.
Probably. A lot of pressure.
A lot of pressure. And to do something so kind of like iconic, it was like, oh, I can see why they chose this man. He's good at his job.
Exactly. I mean, that's why, like, when some of these composers retire, I really hope we have some people lined up.
I think we do. I'm gonna go out on a limb and guess that you really liked the film Arrival.
I don't know if I've seen Arrival, to be honest.
Oh, really? Okay. That's usually one that guys really nerd out about. I'll be
honest. Okay.
Um,
sorry, I don't fit
no,
the typical.
That one, it's not. He didn't score it, but one of his songs is in it. Max Richter. I really like that composer. The name of the song is escaping me, but the modern classical song that he has in that film, really interestingly, has been picked up and used in a bunch of other TV shows and films I've noticed. I think because it kind of has that sorrowful, mostly strings pull. Anyways, he's really good. Another one that probably the film that had the most incredible score that, well, I'll say two, because we were going back and saying that there's not the same like cultural experience listening to, you don't have the same connection as you did as a child watching a film as a kid. I would have the exception of two films that I watched last year that maybe most people would agree with, only because I was really surprised when they both appeared on the radio.
Okay.
So the first one is Barbie and Billie Eilish's song.
Yeah. What song is in there? I actually haven't seen the Barbie movie.
Oh, I have to look up the name of it, but at the very, I think it only plays near the very end of the film. But the whole feeling of, oh yeah, airplane mode, of the film is Barbie's like losing her sense of self.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Billie Eilish's song is very, again, not to use this word 100 times, but ethereal.
Mm-hmm.
There's a haunting quality to it. Uh, I
She has
heard
that with a lot of her songs
she
too.
certainly does. This one I think is a little bit unique in that she described she wanted to come up with a song that felt like what it would feel like if you were singing a song right after you were crying.
Yeah.
Which after having this long emotional experience following Barbie as this character, and which is so reflective, and so many other characters in the film, watching that film as a woman and like seeing things reflected back at you, and then it's kind of like I think part of the reason why that film hit so hard and became so big is because it was talking about problems that all women are feeling, and kind of like that sense of despair that you feel too often as a girl. Anyways, um, the song at the very end kind of reflects that feeling, but also it's both very sad and simultaneously hopeful. So hearing it on the radio and realizing that it was such an emotional moment for so many other people, I would say there are some musical moments that still are shared within the theater. The other one is sorry, I'm gonna look up this song. Hold up, wait a minute.
No, you're good.
Barbie. Another one, another movie that had incredible music. What Was I Made For? By Billie Eilish. That was the name of the song.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Is the Spider-Verse film.
Okay, and that hits you, huh?
Well, Spider-Verse was iconic for a lot of different reasons because it didn't just want to feel like ambient emotion. The composer of that film pulled in all sorts of different genres of music that made it a little more wild, like the animation is. So it's a fun little thing about Spider-Verse. Spider-Verse, when it first came out, which was like 5 or 7 years ago, the first one, it changed. It has and is going to continue to change animation for probably the next 10 to 20 years.
Yeah.
Are you a nerd about this? Do you know about these things?
No, I don't. I have a brother that's into it, but I've noticed the animations do look different from what I've seen, and honestly, I've seen that also with Disney doing their What If series. I don't know if you've seen those.
Just a couple of them.
Yeah, some of the animation's very different. It's like kind of similar, but the animation, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know if I love it. Like there's a couple episodes. Some
Get
of
that
it.
out of your freaking mouth right now.
Have you? You said you don't know if you've seen them though.
Oh, sorry. Of What If?
Yeah,
you can have a bad opinion about them.
Yeah, yeah. So those, because I do like animations, but there's just some that to me it's just very. I think the word that I would use is it's very dim.
Oh, interesting.
Like it's just, but dim, but also very bright at the same time. So like the characters themselves are like kind of dim and like the environment and stuff, but then like the sun will be blaring, and it's almost like they're trying too hard to do reflections and make it too realistic. And to me, that kind of ruins it almost.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I see what they're going for, but I just think some kind of color correction needs to be done because it just everything seems kind of glim, but then also really just like whited out, almost like really bright white light. If that makes kind of sense, but
yeah, that's interesting that you said realistic. Is that the word you used?
Yeah, almost too realistic for an animation, and so it almost kind of ruins it.
Interesting. The Spider-Verse, why? I would say Spider-Verse, and then kind of on the same hand almost as Arcane, the Netflix League of Legends anime, 3D animated series. I don't know if you know anything about that.
I've heard about it, but haven't sat down.
Interestingly, the Imagine Dragons did a song for that, and that was also on the radio. And that's the third example I have of music from some film of some kind of other that was on the radio that was kind of like some universal experience. Anyways, Arcane and Spider Verse have this similar thing where it's the animation rather than lean. It seems like continually each year becomes about how can we make the most realistic kind of animation? How can we make the characters more realistic? How can we make the environments more realistic? How can we animate every blade of grass? And that seems to be what, like, if you watch when Elemental, the trailers for Elemental first came out, I was not the least bit interested in seeing that film just because it was more of the same. How can we make this as the most real looking water anyone's ever seen in this obviously cartoonish character? Great film, by the way. But Spider Verse was doing something completely different where it kind of is embracing the chaos and embracing what you can do technically with like the chaos of a hand drawn and colorful world, where it's always very upsetting to me the very few times that I've seen like concept art from films, specifically animated films, and see how beautiful and colorful and just brush strokes everywhere. How it can be unprecise art in a concept book can be, and then you see the film, and because of making things into a 3D model, it takes away from almost the beauty and the color and the interest, the visual interest. Where Spider-Verse is the closest thing from a living concept art that I think anyone's ever seen. It kind of embraces the chaos, and why I really think that the music's really interesting is because it kind of almost does the exact same thing, where he pulls in so many different kinds and genres of music at the same time simultaneously, and has, like, for example, different themes for different characters. In this film, in Across the Spider-Verse, which is the second Spider-Verse film that came out last year, at the very beginning, the character Gwen, she's kind of like a punk rock star. The movie begins with her hammering at her drums and like the chaos of that.
Yeah.
So her theme throughout the whole thing is this punk rock, crazy drum set situation. Versus Miles, who lives in Harlem, I believe. And his theme's more a little more punky. And just kind of embracing all these different worlds and cultures. Eventually they go to like a whole different parallel universe where the music feels different there. And so each world that they go to has a different feeling to it. And also simultaneously, which I think is kind of what circles this whole thing around and makes it feel a little bit more alive, is to go back. The person who composed it is Daniel Pemberton, but at the same time, they have a bunch of music from Metro Boomin, an artist who has a bunch of songs in the film as well. That kind of makes it feel as if like you're Miles. You're a kid living in Harlem who has his favorite tunes, like his favorite album that he listens to throughout the film, which kind of brings this like element of interesting fun to it that is kind of unique.
Kind of brings it to life, like the whole scene. Like you're there, almost like you're in VR, right? Like there, right with it. It's that kind of
totally, and because it kind of has this interesting duality to it, where it's not just the soundtrack. By soundtrack, I mean like the non-lyrical music that's going on that adds to these moments and brings you to all these characters, especially like when they finally come together when their goals at the very end, and like the music coalesces in an interesting way. But also Metro Boomin's album that's thrown throughout it also adds this element of, you know how like it can be kind of dissatisfying at the very end of a film when they throw in a song that has lyrics to it for the first time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But because they interweave it throughout the whole thing, it gives like a whole new sense to the jive of the film itself, which in itself is so different. The music and the animation gives this whole thing a different, unique, easily identifiable flavor that I'm like, oh, I kind of like, ooh, what a cool feeling.
Yeah.
Like this whole thing is an art project that feels like it's meant to be together. I don't know.
No, that makes sense. I think that is a testament to maybe the team that was behind it. Totally. And how they worked together. Because I can guarantee the visuals and the audio people were working together. And I think you can usually tell when they're not. It's like, okay, we filmed this, now put music to it, right? And it's like an afterthought. You know, you can kind of, it feels like an afterthought. You're like, yeah, there's music there, and I guess it kind of works, but it's not like the art form itself.
Totally.
So,
and I think that's why when I learned that John Powell did War of the Worlds, which is directed by Steven Spielberg, by the way, both geniuses.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I was like, I wonder what it could have been if there had been more interweaving, if he hadn't seen just half the film and they were kind of mix matching. For example, one of the more iconic pieces, the one that more becomes the theme of War of the Worlds, initially he just wanted that to be an end credits song. But because Steven saw it and was like, actually, that's really good.
You're like, actually, let's do something else with that.
Right. So it's just kind of interesting that, you know, it didn't have the same teamwork as you were describing.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of interesting. Another film, not quite like War of the Worlds, another thriller, kind of scary film that I absolutely adore. The scores by James Newton Howard, is the movie Signs, an M. Night Shyamalan classic.
Oh, very nice.
Are you familiar with that one?
I like not as familiar as you probably, but I've
not.
seen it before.
Oh yeah, didn't we watch it at your house? At the casita?
Oh, I think we did.
Yeah,
I
did. I think you might have been playing games in the other room.
Yeah, I could have been.
I love Signs. It's like just scary enough that you can watch it with your friends and your family, and it's totally fine. Well, maybe small children.
Depends, you know. That's something that you wouldn't catch my parents. Well, my dad maybe, my mom no.
Maybe
of course,
so.
But you know.
It's just like it was kind of like my little gateway drug to what thrillers and horrors and like darker themed movies could be. I think I always really liked that stuff, but I never knew it until I finally experienced it. I was like in very much a rated G household. Anyway, so it was just, I love that film, partially just because it's so quiet, and there's something about M. Night Shyamalan's directing that he, I guess, asks his actors to act like they've never talked to people for the first time or something. It's very bizarre. I've just noticed that in a few of his films. But anyways, it's about this little family that lives in this townhouse where the father has resigned himself from the church. He was a priest.
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell that there's discord in this family. It's the father, his two young children, and his brother who lives above the garage. And since he's not a preacher anymore, he's turned to farming. He has this cornfield. And the movie's all quite quiet, and the mystery starts to percolate as this mystery of crop circles show up in his cornfield right outside the house. And other odd things start to happen in town, and like, what's going on? But there's also this at the center, this family situation. But the music in that film, even though it's like a quiet country scene, does the most.
Yeah.
It is nothing but intense violins. And honestly, at times, the music is more terrifying than what's going on screen.
Yeah. Probably. It's just like hitting you, like the anxiety of the music.
Yes. The opening. Oh, I love the opening of Signs. Sorry, I'm a huge nerd of this film, obviously.
That's okay. That's what we're here to talk about.
The camera pans over the town.
Uh-huh.
And after the 8th time I watched that film, I was like, we're in the perspective of the aliens right now. Anyways, but that's when the theme hits initially, where it's I thought it was really interesting learning more about this film and the score behind it. M. Night apparently doesn't like the fact that he needs to score his films. He would rather have his films be silent, because he'd rather the moments and the writing stand on itself rather than having to have the assist of music, which I found really fascinating, as I just described that the music is rather intense.
That is interesting. It's like, I don't like this music,
No.
or I don't like music, but I'm gonna make it intense.
Yes. But in this music, there's always like this curiosity and like a flittiness to it where, for example, as I described, he has his 2 young children with him, and there's, oh, for example, his one daughter, Bo, is so cute and so sweet and innocent. And so there's music where they're just like, they want their father to be okay. And so when all these crazy miracles, question mark, things start to happen, there's a hopefulness and a curiosity and a wonder to the music, when at other times it's terrifying.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's one film that I really like the score to that one. Um,
Well, I'm getting cold out
yeah,
here,
it's
and my hot
freezing.
chocolate's almost done.
Yes.
And I'm sure we could talk about scoring of movies and video games. We didn't get too much into video games, but I think this was a fun conversation. They'll just talk about like your expertise in the film. Obviously, you're a little bit bigger nerd on a lot of things than me, which is fine, which is awesome. But it was fun to kind of talk shop, a little bit and talk music. So hopefully this was fun for you to be on and kind of nerd out a little bit about.
Yeah, obviously I can monologue forever.
Yeah, which is fine. But yeah, thank you, Brooklyn, for being on the podcast, and we'll have to have you again sometime. And yeah, thank you again.
Thank
Cheers.
you.